Guys, welcome to the Masters of SaaS podcast, brought to you by Uproar Media, a growth marketing agency for SaaS, specializing in paid media, content, and conversion rate optimization. I'll be your host, Todd Chambers. I have the absolute pleasure of chatting with really smart people from the SaaS industry. The goal is to extract as much value as possible. What are their strategies, their tactics, their failures, funny stories, key learnings? All of this can then be used to help you grow and scale your own SaaS business. In this episode, I speak with Paul Campillo, Director of Brand and Communications at Typeform. Typeform was founded by two designers in 2012 and now has over 300 employees. The product turns average forms and surveys into powerful brand communication tools. Prior to working at Typeform, Paul was marketing the unmarketable, helping offenders from some of the world's most dangerous prisons reintegrate back into society. Someone recommended Typeform, and out of curiosity, he ended up spending 3 hours completing a job application. Not long after, someone called. The CEO wanted to know how he did it. We discussed his interesting journey, as well as SaaS branding, what is a meaningful brand, why branding matters more than ever, and Paul's best advice on how to develop a meaningful vision, mission, and values. It's one of my favorite episodes so far, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, no, it's good to be here, Todd.
Oh, pleasure is all mine. Let's start off with a basic introduction. Who is Paul? And you can tackle that in any way you like.
Oh man, right now my role is as director of brand. I think overall, though, I think I'm a somewhat of a philosopher or a wannabe philosopher. I'm somebody who cares about people and wants people to have the best experience no matter where they are on the planet. And I care about their potential. I want people to not just be their best selves, but also be themselves. And I mean, you'll see how that ties in later probably to my brand philosophy and why it's so critical to be who you are or be more of who you are.
I want to say this in the politest way possible, but you have a pretty amazing role in a pretty amazing company. And looking at your background, I would say your trajectory into this role would definitely not be considered traditional. You have a really interesting background and story. Would you mind kind of sharing what you were doing in the last 5 years you've been in Typeform, but kind of what were you doing in the few years before you joined?
Yeah, my background is kind of all over the place because I was terrible at school. So I didn't even graduate high school, don't follow my footsteps, please, children. I didn't graduate high school. I dropped out of college 3 times when I finally got my diploma. And, I just kind of found myself like wandering and trying to figure out like what I wanted to do. I got most of my inspiration in bookstores. I figured, well, I'm just going to learn what I'm interested in learning. It seemed right to me at the time. I found myself in the Eastern philosophy section or, doing all these different things. But then eventually I was having conversations with people. I was working in a restaurant at the time. People were like, talking about their problems, during breaks and things like that. And I would just like have this different perspective. My friend at the time was like, oh, you need to meet my wife. She's a counselor at this agency, this social work agency. And I was like, okay. So we had dinner, we started talking about these things and how would I approach working with youth and things like that. And she said, oh, you should apply. I never applied because frankly, I was scared. I wasn't really qualified. I didn't have all the credentials or whatever. What I noticed after that is I started having these panic attacks. So I was having these panic attacks, and then eventually I realized the problem I was having the panic attacks was more related to my lack of courage than anything else. And I decided, oh, forget it. I'm just going to go for it. And I ended up applying. She got me an interview, and I'm sitting in front of so if you can imagine this interview, it's like there's a long table. You're sitting at the end of it. There's 3 people who are very intimidating looking at you and asking you questions. Do you have education? No. Do you have a license? No. A registration? No. Asking me all these questions I certainly wasn't qualified for. They were getting ready to say no to me. And then they asked me this one question. They asked me why people are poor. And so when they asked me why people are poor, I guess that was my chance to explain the root causes of why people are poor. And so I got into that answer. Anyway, long story short, one guy wanted to take a chance on me because of how I answered that question. Next thing you know, my social work career kind of took off. I was featured in multiple articles. I even had reporters come up to me and say, we never got that kind of response from that kind of article before. And then I found myself on the front page of the Sunday Times, of the Sunday paper in Seattle. Almost got me on Oprah. They shared that story everywhere. I even saw it, I believe, in syndication in London. Anyway, it's just kind of spread everywhere. And then next thing you know, I was bombarded by a whole bunch of people. But I spent most of my time in social work, and I was working primarily with reentry. Reentry is just a fancy academic word for people who are re-entering society from prison. So I was working with youth first, and then I started working with adults, working with people who are coming out of San Quentin and California's big state prisons. And my job was to help them find jobs. Right. And my job was to market the unmarketable. And so that was, I guess you could say, this is where my background in social work kind of kicked in. What led me to Typeform was one day the CEO of my organization came in and said, hey, I just met with Zynga and Pandora. Zynga is known for Farmville, Mafia Wars, and all those Facebook games, right? Words with Friends. Pandora, the streaming music company, they said that we should be using Typeform. And so I said, okay, what's that? And the reason why she came up to me is because I was known for always trying new shit. I was the innovative person in the organization. So I checked it out, saw the website. I was like, this is cool. I like their little personality. And then I noticed that animated GIF or GIF in the corner. It said, come work in the sun. And I was like, well, okay, that sounds interesting. Let me click on that.
You got my attention.
And I clicked on that, and it took me to a job application, and there was like different roles that they presented to me. And I was like, oh, it looks like I could do that content manager thing. Click. And, I started filling out this, very detailed job application. Some of the questions they asked me, like rewrite the copy, this web page, use the inspector, rewrite the copy, upload all the screenshots to this Typeform, write a blog post, in addition to a few other things like your LinkedIn profile. Do you have a website or a blog? Took me 3-4 hours, submitted it. And I was like, okay, this looks like a cool tool. I think we could use this in our organization. Didn't think anything of what I just did. I spent 3 or 4 hours just because I felt it was challenging and I wanted to do it. And then a week later, I got an email from the head of HR, and she said, thanks for your interest in our project. Our marketing manager and co-founder want to meet with you. And I was like, oh shit, what have I done? I don't even know if I'm really interested in this. Got in a call, had a conversation with the co-founder. Basically, he just wanted to know why. He's like, first of all, you submitted one of the best tests that we got. Second of all, how did you do it? What did you do? I kind of explained my background a little bit. I don't think I really got into, the empathy side and, how I'm able to kind of like transport myself and feel what other people are feeling. So I was able to kind of experience what the brand was trying to say. And I was also able to experience what the person who is coming to the page wanting to do and wanting to accomplish from that website. And so I just merged the two together, and the rest is history. I was writing content for a while. Then I was head of copy and story. Next thing you know, I'm director of brand. And I'm like, how did I get here?
It's a super interesting story, because you said the built-in virality of Typeform kind of took it to a certain point. And then I heard you on another podcast and you were talking about, okay, they needed to kind of augment this, build upon it using content and brand. It seems like a risky decision by them to hire someone like yourself who didn't have that direct content experience. What was that kind of unique thing about you that stood out and they chose you over? I'm sure they had some other really good qualified candidates as well.
Yeah, they gave me a test, so that you could say that job application was the first test, but they also gave me another test where I had to write an article that was keyword rich, I think around surveys. I'm sure that article exists somewhere. I think the way that I wrote it, tend to think about the reader. I'm super influenced by Stephen King, and he's written a billion books, right? And they're all like this thick. He said, everything that I write is for one person. It's for my wife. I know what makes her laugh. I know what makes her cry. I know what makes her scared, like all these different things. And that's the only person I write to. It happens to appeal to a lot of people. Since I didn't really have someone in mind, I was writing the article that I wanted to read. When I read articles, I want to be somewhat entertained, but I also, I want to be somewhat surprised, but I also want to be informed and educated. There's something to that, and I think that's kind of what resonated. That's what connected me to the founders. Is they created something that was really just scratching their own itch. I'm sure you and I could talk about all the founders that really created amazing stuff by scratching their own itch because that's what they wanted to see in the world. I guess I kind of adhere to that philosophy too. I really believe in that.
It seems like you've been at Typeform for 5 years and you really moved up within the company. How do you think you kind of built your sphere of influence within the company? Kind of a similar question. What is it about you that you think has helped you grow within the company and now move into this bigger position than when you started?
Admittedly, And I have no problem admitting how ignorant I am, and even pronounce myself the king of ignorance at one point during a meeting. I was nosy. I wanted to know why things were they were they were the way they were, why people were doing what they were doing, why we were building whatever it is we were building. Maybe not at first, but over time, this nosiness kind of kicked in. And obviously, I'm the first marketing hire at Typeform. We're at 28 people. There's a lot that I have to take in, especially even at that early stage of a company. But there was a lot of things that when you're ignorant and you're aware that you're ignorant, you do whatever you can to learn. So I'm reading blogs now. I'm trying to understand how other people are doing what they're doing. And this is all from the marketing side. And then once you've kind of like filled that coffer, and it's never full, I mean, you're still always learning new stuff and trying different things, you kind of start expanding. You're like, well, what's the role of customer success and what's going on over here in product? And so I had this really horizontal view of the company at early days, kind of always carried and grown as we've expanded. I think we were at like 150 people when we decided to really start listening to customers and to really start having those conversations. I was one of the people that was a part of a small team that was doing jobs to be done interviews, was another tool or tactic that helped me understand why people were doing what they're doing. And it kind of changed my entire philosophy and how I approached the work. Now, it was definitely much more customer centric. I think intuitively, I kind of knew this in the beginning. Even my approach to content, at first, they wanted me to do the writing. I questioned that. I really questioned that. And I questioned my credibility to represent whatever they wanted me to be credible at, right? So if it was an NPS survey, or how do you get more feedback through a customer feedback survey, or whatever the case is, I didn't feel credible.
Kind of
And
like imposter syndrome. You didn't feel like you had the credibility.
yeah, I was very much aware of my ignorance, but I was also aware that the reader doesn't want what I want to give them. What I'm going to give them. They want something of substance. And so I coined a term for this at Typeform, and everyone started using it. I called it hot dog content. And hot dog content is basically, I watched this episode of The Simpsons, and they showed a picture of a hot dog coming together. It was like a rat hair and a piece of meat here and a piece of meat there, and they slapped it all together and they formed a hot dog. And so I started terming that hot dog content, because what we tend to do is go to Google, we look up, we open up 20 tabs, and we take a little bit of information from everything, and then we create our little hot dog and we give it to the world. And it's nothing new. It's just kind of like a little piece of everything without any real insight, and we give that to the world to eat. I didn't think that was cool. And so intuitively, I reached out to Joanna Weeb from Copy Hackers. I reached out to Pep Laya from Conversion XL. And I'm like, hey, would you be interested in writing an article? And we didn't end up following that track as our strategy. We still kind of stuck to our guns, and we were just going to write our articles. But if I had to do it all over again, I would totally go in this direction, especially with all the customers that we have, and being able to tap that as a resource to either get them represented on the blog and their expertise, or in some other way. I just think that there's too many people, especially now, especially with the algorithm changes with Google, and how they expect something that's unique. They expect something that's fresh, that's relevant, that's useful, and all these different things. And I'm sure you could tell me all about this, because this is kind of your expertise. But I sense that search engines are evolving to a point where I just want to see the most credible, useful, even entertaining stuff. And so that also leads to another insight that I had, which was, how do we do more branded SEO? And people always ask me, like, what are you talking about when you say that? How can I make it more exciting? How can I make it more interesting? So I wrote the Star Wars Guide to NPS. And it's nice when you get a tweet and the person says, this is the best piece of content on the internet ever, or something like that. And it was because, we had action figures that you could move around. We were talking about NPS the whole time. It's laced with keywords and all those things. And I mean, that's all there. But as far as like the representation, adding the design layer to it. And so I'll challenge our SEO writers, and, they haven't taken me up on it yet. I'll be like, hey, can we create a comic book with keywords? Can we really like entertain people here, besides just putting together another piece of hot dog content? Yeah. To tie it back to your original question, I think the reason why I'm where I'm at right now is because I'm always biased to standing out.
We'll definitely get onto that. One thing that did spring to mind, because you were in Typeform when it was under 30 people, and there are several hundred people at Typeform now. How was that? I'm not sure how many people really get to see a company go from 20, 30 people to hundreds of people and be, synonymous worldwide. How is it being on that journey from your perspective and kind of growing within the company as the company grows? It seems like a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, it's cool and it's painful.
Yeah. Why painful?
No, I say it's painful because yeah, you're gonna make me get real on this podcast.
I hope so.
It's cool because you get to see all this tremendous growth. You get to see this company move from, I don't know, I guess the best way to look at it is from the baby stage to, the young kid stage to the adolescent stage to the, the young adult stage. To you get to see all this. And I can imagine as a parent how painful that is and how rewarding it is at the same time. I have relatively close relationships with the founders, and if anything, through all the trying times, I've stuck around because of them. The painful part is because sometimes things get lost in translation. So if you're trying to scale your culture from, I don't know, 28, and you're probably not even thinking I'm trying to scale the culture, you're just thinking I'm trying to scale the business, but you don't realize everything that comes with that. So your original vision might get diluted a little bit. Things might get more bureaucratic. These are not my favorite things right now. Things move a little bit slower, bigger versus solving the problem of as you get bigger, how do you get smaller, right? And I think that's a challenge that we're dealing with now. But it's also when people leave. When people leave, all the institutional knowledge is gone. And then when new people come in, the institutional knowledge that's left in the building doesn't necessarily get accessed. Or people don't refer to the old heads. They're trying to discover everything on their own again, and so we end up in the same place like 2 years later. And so to me, that's kind of the painful part. I wish there was a better way, and I'm not just talking about in companies. I wish there was a better way to pass down wisdom.
Yeah.
We're so good at passing down knowledge, and we're so terrible at passing down wisdom, which is, I mean, you can skip a lot of the facts that people have and kind of get to the learnings that people have. That's missing, right? And I'm not just talking about in any company, but I'm just saying in general in society, like that's a problem that we definitely need to solve.
How do you do that? How do you pass down wisdom in a company that's growing so fast? I don't know what the average lifespan of an employee is in a big tech company, but I'd imagine you're probably above the average at 5 years. How do you retain that wisdom when employees are kind of so transient?
It's not just that. In 2018, we overturned our entire leadership team. Entire leadership team is gone and it's been
Wow.
replaced, except for the co-founder. I mean, he's still there, co-founders. And eventually the second co-founder, Robert, left. That's
And you're
another
the guy.
that's another transition, right? Sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I'm so sorry to interrupt. But actually, what struck me as you said that was you're actually the guy that's in charge of. I'm not sure if it was at that point, but you're the guy that's in charge of the brand, the values, the essence of the company. You're the guy that's holding the line on the brand, and then the whole leadership team changes. It must have been pretty tough for you to take the new leadership's kind of values and how they see the company running, and yeah, keeping that unified within the company. That must have been really tough.
Yeah, well, that was tough. And I think that was one of the hardest years that we've had. So in 2019, we lost a lot of talent. We lost a lot of people. There's a lot of reasons for why that is. People had different perspectives on why maybe people were let go. Some people left because they didn't like the new change. They felt like the culture change didn't fit the old days. I was kind of in the middle on this. I felt like some people in the leadership position felt like, some people weren't pulling their weight. Me personally, as, I guess you can call me a leader in the company, always owned and questioned how much we were connected to, the employees, how much we were actually leading, people and what leadership really means and what that means for culture and all those things. So I was questioning the leaders probably more than I was questioning the employees. So there was a lot of different views, but in either case, it was a very disruptive time. A lot of people left, a lot of new people came in. And so now you're dealing with that. You're dealing with all this institutional knowledge is going out the door and all these new people are coming in and you kind of feel like, oh shit, man, I got to start all over again.
Yeah.
I got to indoctrinate and propagandize.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
evangelize everything, all over again. So to me, that was difficult. As far as what we did, and you cannot do this alone. I would say my partner in crime here was Oscar. He's our director of strategy. Very important ally in 2019 in trying to keep the culture together, trying to reestablish a new set of values, trying to reestablish a new mission and vision, which I worked with our CEO, our current CEO, and David, our co-founder, with, and trying to like keep the ship together, the glue that ties everything together. This year we had a lot of workshops with the entire company. So it's like with the product team, with the customer success team, with the marketing team, with the pops, people team. And, everyone had a shot to be a part of this, and just to make sure that we're on the same page and where we're trying to go as a company, what we're trying to do and what we're trying to build. It's very hands-on. It's doing stuff that doesn't scale, but it needs to be done, right? And it's just ongoing work. If we tie this back to brand, how critical culture is to brand, it's everything. If you don't get the inside right, you can forget the expression on the outside is just going to be superficial and shallow. And so you might hear me, in every meeting or every other meeting talking about how we need to get Typeformers, our whole team, moving in the same direction. Otherwise, we're screwed as a brand. Like, we're not going to be able to express it to its fullest potential. Everything ties back to that.
So many ways I could go with this, but personally, we went through, we're a tiny company compared to Typeform, and we did the cliche thing, loads of company, okay, we need like vision, mission, and values. And I find that process really, really hard. And to be honest, the thing that made it really hard for me is because I guess in a way, it almost felt forced and almost kind of inauthentic. And we ended up with these visions that were like, we want to, change the world. But I'm like, we're an ad agency, right? It's like, come on. Like, and it's like it just didn't feel right. And even to this day, the only thing that we really have defined is just two values. I feel like that whole mission, vision, values, like it's almost like a tick box in how you build a company. And in my mind, whenever I see loads of companies, I'll go on their website and I'll see their vision. I just instantly just feel like it just seems bullshit. It just seems so forced up in the cloud. And you mentioned their workshops, and I would imagine getting involvement from as many people as you can, because then your people feel like they have buy-in and they're more involved in the process. But what has been the key learnings to you to develop vision, mission, and values?
Yeah. So admittedly, I'm a philosopher, but I'm a pragmatic, no bullshit guy. Okay. In the end, if the vision, mission, and values ends up being a plaque on the wall, then it's no good. We had to frame this in such a way so that the vision and mission became a strategic objective. If it wasn't a strategic objective, if it wasn't a core daily driver of what we do every day, then it's useless. It's exactly what you said. And same with the values. Everything has to tie in to this ultimate objective and what you're trying to accomplish. And so, man, I can break down how we,
Please.
how we
Yeah.
how we cascade this. The mission is the daily thing. It's like, what are we trying to do on a daily basis, right? If you get your mission, then that's naturally going to lead to the outcome of vision. The mission is how, and the vision is where, or where you end up, right? And the vision is like this future thing, and it's ultimately controlled by the mission. Our mission is to inspire brands to have meaningful conversations at scale. You could say, well, okay, let's break that down. What do you mean? I've had when I was working on the wording for this, our CEO and our co-founder was like, well, do we really want to inspire people to have meaningful conversations at scale, or do we want to empower them? And I said, well, let's put it this way. People are already having conversations all the time. We're having a conversation. If someone comes to your website, they're having a conversation with you in their head, or with some interactive elements on your website, right? Whether that's a form or whatever. And to us, the way we translate that is that it's a conversation. There's a lot of people that are using Typeform right now, but they're not using it to the potential that they could use it. What's the potential of that interaction? Well, it could be a meaningful conversation. And that's kind of how we want to kind of change that mindset, not treat it like, like a frivolous thing. I guess you could say the biggest problem that we solve as a company is that we realized that the exchange of information is the most important interaction on the web for a business. Period. That exchange of information is usually done through forms, and those forms are boring, stale, or they're just lifeless. And what we wanted to do is make them fun and interactive. And in the words of our co-founders, we wanted it to feel like a conversation. And I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That's a useful metaphor. I think we are having conversations. I think even as we go into the future, we're moving more to the self-service model. So there's a lot of conversations that need to happen. All that's there. Okay, so let's inspire people to have these meaningful conversations and inspire. Why inspire? Because probably people are just thinking about, I just need some data. And we wanted it to be more than that. We see Typeform as a tool that not just pulls in the data, but also communicates. It's a communication tool. And we could talk about Typeform, we could talk about Video Ask and how they fit into this entire vision mission complex. But that's the ultimate goal. And so we decided, okay, so inspire brands to have meaningful conversations at scale. Why? Because that's going to lead to people having more personal or personal business relationships, or business relationships that feel more personal. Okay, now let's take it one level down. What can we do with meaningful conversations? Okay, so how do we transform the product right now into so that it's a more meaningful conversation? We sat and we thought about this, and we worked with a few people, and we came up with this meaningful design framework. What's meaningful design? Well, it's 4 things. Number 1, can we make that conversation personal? What personal elements can we add to it? And I'm not talking about personalization where you just add a name and you just creep people out with their name. But can we make the information that's being exchanged more personalized? So it's more, they feel like, oh, this is for me. The second thing is contextual. What's happening in the environment right now? What data can we pull from their environment to make this more contextual? For example, where are you located? You're in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Okay. So being able to use that data, being able to, maybe it's just in the greeting. It's like, hey, how's the weather in Amsterdam today?
Shit, by the way.
yeah, or make sure you carry an umbrella, when you go out, whatever the case is. But just being able to tie in, and that's not just weather data, but it's also, what device are you on? What's the general context of, this interaction? And then I call it environmental data. And then the relevance. Okay, just because I know your name or just because I know what you're interested in doesn't mean, you might want to talk about soups and I'm over here talking about salads, or you want to talk about dogs and I want to talk about cats, and that's not a relevant conversation. So those 4 elements, the 4th element is beautiful. How do we make sure that whatever that you are able to do in the product represents you, represents your best self? So we got 4 elements: beautiful, relevant, contextual, and personal. When we bring all 4 of those things together, we have what's called a meaningful conversation. You can look at our product and you say, well, you're not quite there yet. Yes, but we can look at each one of those elements and we can just imagine a progress bar in your head. Yeah, maybe we're like 60% beautiful, and maybe we're like, 30% relevant right now, and maybe we're, wherever we are in the product for those 4 different elements. But you can see how we started at the very top with this vision and mission, and how it's now starting to cascade into the organization and what we're ultimately trying to do.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good example, but it
great.
can't be impractical. That's the point. Otherwise, everyone gets lost and says, okay, that's fluff. And just to your point earlier, it's like, okay, we got a nice plaque on the wall. Now, what do we do with that?
Totally. I think so many companies do that. But now talking about Video Ask, which was a product I wasn't too familiar with, how involved were you in the brand of Video Ask, and kind of were you involved? And if so, kind of how did you approach that? Was it in a very similar way? And kind of how do the values and things transition from Typeform through to Video Ask?
Yeah, so Video Ask came out of a internal hackathon that we had, and it was a vision that the founder had. He said he always had this idea of how can we make things more personal. That's kind of how Video Ask was born. It's like, okay, we did it with Typeform, so using multimedia to communicate and collect data and exchange information. Now, can we do it with people? Can we do it with actual people? So the form becomes a person. Yeah, I was there. I was there in the beginning. We worked on positioning statements together, and it was I guess you could say, like, a lot of people converged on the project in the beginning, and now they have their own team and they're building it out. They got a creative director who's focusing more on the marketing side and the brand side. David has the unique skill and talent of building brand from the beginning. And I believe that all founders should think and build brand from the beginning. And we could talk about what brand is and how I see that. I think my most useful contribution was, besides early versions of copy, maybe their tagline now, which is the best interface is your face.
Wow, it's so hard to come up with a good tagline. That really rolls off the tongue. It's good.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from. It just made sense to me. I did do a little bit of study on, like, everyone was talking about video, 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 video. What interested me was not video. It was the people behind the video. What draws people in naturally is the human face. And I was thinking maybe that's why video was so successful. And so, that's kind of how that whole thing played out. And I started looking at data, and I started looking at, I believe I was on Wistia, and they were talking about faces and how important faces are. It makes sense that Wistia would create content around this because that's their whole product, right? It's video. It's a video product. And so when I followed that rabbit hole, I was like, yeah, this makes sense. And this is what people pay attention to. It's not about video. It's about connecting the people, right?
This kind of ties in as well with the vision, the mission, and the values. We were speaking about it before, this movement in terms of making meaningful companies. Do you feel that movement? And do you think that vision, mission, and values is kind of a reflection of people not just being so capitalist, and they're trying to tie something meaningful to companies as well? So what is your take on the movement of meaningful companies?
Yeah, it just makes sense. I mean, and we could talk about 7 years ago. We could talk about 8 years ago, and why brand and some of these other things didn't matter as much. And you're probably familiar with the MarTech stack. What is it, 5,000? And where you can see all the marketing tech companies that exist. And we know in 2011 there was only 150, not a lot of competition. And as time progresses, I mean, right now there's 8,000 companies. I don't even know why they call it the MarTech 5,000. It should be 8,000, and probably 9,000 in 2021. As you get into a more competitive environment, as you start dealing with the proliferation of technology and how it's easy for makers to make things and bring all these things to bear, you can no longer compete on features and price and some of these other things. Yeah, there's a lot of innovative ways you can look at your business model. You can do something there. If you can do something special there, you have a nice moat for your business. But rarely is that the case. People are just copying each person's pricing tables and importing it over to what they're doing, or they're copying each other's features, which I'm for. I'm for copying features. I'm not for copying brand and copy, which I've seen people do. But this movement is more critical now, because now with more choice in the market, you got people who are basically commodities to everyone else, right? You got these companies that are commodities. So how do I choose? And if I'm choosing on pricing, or whether you get found first on SEO, or if I type in a keyword, again, I'm comparing a commodity to commodity. And so my whole thing is, how do we get found before anyone goes to Google? I kind of got inspired by something Rand Fishkin said. Someone asked him, what's the most effective and ignored SEO strategy? And he says, well, building a brand that has more search volume than its keywords. and to me, that was everything. That was confirmation that it's critical to build something that stands out. And in our view, that's building a meaningful brand. Now, what's a meaningful brand? It's three things, really. The first thing is you got to deliver a product that works, or a service that works, right? So functional benefits, that's the first point. The second point is personal benefits. And I think this is untapped and unexplored territory for every company out there. So personal benefits is basically, how do we help someone become who they aspire to be? And then the third thing is collective benefits. What are we doing beyond earning a profit for the world, for society, for our community, or whatever sliver or corner of the world that you exist in? Can we do more there? I was happy to see a founder friend of mine who runs a SEO company open up this other avenue of, I forgot what it is. I think they're planting trees around the world or whatever.
Yeah.
But stuff like that. And so that would be the collective benefit. We are even going to the point of hiring. I'm hiring head of social impact, kind of deal with this. When you go to a partner, let's say like someone like Slack, and Slack says to you, hey, that sounds like a great partnership. So what do you do in the community?
Yeah.
And you don't have an answer. You don't have an answer for that now. So my point was that with all the competition, with everything that exists in the world, people's buying criteria has shifted. Now I know I have access to all this, Now I can take it to the level of values. Now I can actually buy a company based on the values that they project. If you're not playing that game now, you're probably going to lose in the future. And this is something Steve Jobs knew a long time ago. I think in one of his famous, I think it was 1997 when he launched a Mac, or 98. He said, marketing is about values. It's important for people to know who we are and what we stand for, and we got to communicate that to people. I never really got it until, of course, we're in this, huge revolution of technology, and brand didn't matter 8 years ago, but it matters today. And there's data to back that up. But
Yeah, this is where it gets tricky because marketers mess everything up, right? They manipulate things. They're always looking for the silver bullet. And I guess the shame is that companies will try and use this doing social good, having meaning, purely for the benefits of profit. So if you're somebody that's thinking about building a meaningful company, how should you do that? Should it be something that's tied to you personally as a human being, comes from the founder, or is it collectively among the company? Like, how do you go about deciding on where you should be meaningful in the world, and doing it in a way that's authentic as opposed to just purely for the...
yeah, I think it comes from the person who's most passionate about it. And so in this case, it would be me. Once people see that and they get inspired by it, it's not like we weren't contributing things before. Like, we've done volunteer stuff before. We've pulled together our resources and, supported organizations. Could we be a little bit more structured? Could we do this in a more organized fashion? Could we, have someone lead this effort? Sure, why not? Like, we could do that. And I get what you're saying. It's like, what's the play here?
Yeah.
Is it a PR play? Are we trying to do that? And I would say no, and that's what I brought up Slack for a reason, because I appreciate their quiet spirit or attitude about this whole thing. You got to kind of look on their website for the stuff that they're doing, right? But they're doing it, and they're partnering with other brands and trying to, bring some initiatives to life. And they're not just, they're not just talking the talk, they're walking the walk. And, and you could also say that's a major shift from the brands of before to the brands of now. You just can't bullshit as much, like, people are looking at you. We've also seen an uptick in brand activism. Salesforce not going to move your headquarters to North Carolina because of your bathroom laws. They're serious. Mark Benioff is a serious man. He's not playing. He's really not going to move. And to me, that anyone within the company can kind of begin this movement and get other people inspired. It doesn't have to come from the founder, but I think it should be enabled by the founder, or the CEO at the time, right? And our CEO is like completely behind this. I think he sees not just a new role for brands to play in the future, but also the problems that plague our society, and we can do more besides just sit there and make money all day.
Yeah, for sure. Just actually, one of my last kind of professional questions before I move on to personal ones. When you're talking about money, how do you feel like your own personal relationship with money has changed? I can only speak from myself personally. To me, money, I don't want to say it used to be everything, but it used to be, very, very important. And these days, I can honestly say, doesn't mean so much to me these days. And maybe it's because you have that kind of hierarchy of needs, and when you reach a certain level, your happiness doesn't increase anymore. But how has kind of your personal relationship with money changed over the years?
That's a good question, because I'm used to making a paltry salary, right? I'm just not used to making anything. To be a part of a company that's growing, obviously it's paying more than, any social work job, and, and then stock in the company. It didn't change anything.
No.
I thought it would affect me in a different way, especially since in 2013 or 2010, I filed for bankruptcy. And then in 2013, I lost my home to foreclosure. It like, my values are where they are. Maybe it's because I'm older, or, whatever the case, but I see money as more of a tool to get things done. And I'm always been more concerned with leading indicators than lagging indicators.
Hmm.
And so I'm sure you could ask me what our ARR is, and I would hazard a guess, our MRR. And to me, I'm less concerned about that than I am with the more leading indicators, which is emotion, right? The most leading indicator of all is how someone feels. That's the thing that wakes me up every day. That's the thing that inspires me. And how can I help someone get more of what they want? How can I help someone be more of who they are? How can I help people create a better experience overall in the world? To me, that's the thing that drives me. If we can make the world or make the web a little more human, as David told me, or if I can inspire people just have meaningful conversations like we're having. Forget the tool, forget Typeform, forget Video Ask. Just let's have more conversations. And that's what excites me. When I see customers like MATA. So you heard MAGA, right? Make America Great Again. So someone came up with MATA, Make America Dinner Again. It's a customer of ours. What they were doing is they were bringing together people who very right leaning and very left leaning and had dinner together and bringing them together. So they use Typeform to bring them together. When you see like stories like this and customers who are doing interesting things, and to me that's the most exciting part.
You strike me as someone, one of the first things you said when we started was about, you're a philosopher of sorts. You seem like somebody that's a deep thinker. And I think in my research for this, I think I heard that you like to journal. Is that still the case? How long have you been journaling? Why is that important to you?
I guess you could say I'm a writer at heart. Maybe I'm a thinker more than a writer. But the thing is, when you write, you clarify your thinking, right? And to me, this is what's critical about writing. So maybe I am more of a thinker than a writer. Now that you posed the question to me, and I care more about clarifying, focusing on, what's the most important thing. So if you saw my journal, and maybe I could share a screenshot. It's just me rambling on about blah, 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 blah. This is what I need to do today, or this is what's going on in my mind, or whatever the case is. And then every once in a while, something's going to come out. Like there's going to be, out of all that carbon and coal, it's going to come a diamond, right? And you're going to take that diamond and run with it. And you're going to end up with things like the best interface is your face.
Well, actually, just maybe my very last question on kind of back to business again on copywriting. One of the mistakes that I often see people make is being kind of overthinking things and speaking kind of superlatives. And actually, one of the hardest things in copywriting, or maybe even in marketing, is saying things in the least possible words. I was listening to Yuval Noah Harari. I always get the guy's name wrong, that wrote Sapiens. He was saying
Harari,
about actually to be able to teach history to that level, you have to make it as simple as possible. When you make it as simple as possible, you can't hide behind, bullshit, fancy marketing speak. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? And do you feel like having that clarity of thought is kind of being able to articulate the thing you're trying to say in the least possible words?
Yes. So what I found is that people tend to do that on their own if you have a conversation with them. I mean, they say things in a very colloquial or very simple way. You could talk about copywriting for a while, and I have my frameworks that I use. But one of the most important parts of a framework that I use is proof, right? And how it's so underutilized. And I'm not just talking about slapping testimonials on your page, or showing a demo, which is also proof, or showing authority, which is a bunch of logos that everyone sees, right? Airbnb uses us, Nike uses it. Like all that is important. But when you have your customer voice and you have, and I could read off a list because I keep track of all this stuff. When someone says, yo, man, it's like the Apple of forms. How do I use that? That's what I want to do. I want to add that somewhere on the website. When someone says, man, it feels just like a conversation, that needs to go somewhere. Like I need that to go somewhere. I need that to influence what we do and how we project that copy. So to me, us having a conversation right now, or just seeing what people write unsolicited about your product or your service, is so underutilized by copywriters. I just can't for the life of me figure out why you're passing up on using this valuable treasure trove of knowledge. And one of the most underrated places to get copy ideas is Reddit.
Interesting.
Because they're just a bunch of discussions and conversations, and the way people write there is just amazing. Like, and we're talking what you just said, right? In very plain terms and very simple terms in those conversations. And it's so valuable. Like it's super valuable. It's a treasure trove.
You also tried to take that one step further, right? And integrate the voice of the customer in as much content as possible, right? So if you're making, a blog article about something, it's like, how can I involve the customer in this as much as possible? Would that be a fair statement, a strategy that you use?
I would say that if your content strategy is not centered around the people who matter most to your business, and I'm talking about like two groups, your customers and your employees, your content strategy is off. If you could get your customers to actually write an article, I just looked at an email before we jumped on. This guy is like offering to write a case study for us. And I'm like, who wants to get in the way of that? Like, you want people, like, I've gotten to the point now where I want to tell our customer stories so that I can promote them. I want to use our website as a platform to promote our customers and their businesses. And, you know, I kind of did this with Swag Up, who's a customer. They create swag for startups. And I reached, we were getting ready to advertise the Morning Brew, which is a very popular newsletter, right? Reaches like millions of people. And I reached out to him. I was like, dude, like, I want to tell your story on Morning Brew, and I want it to be about you. And you could talk about Typeform, whatever, but I just went, you know, like, this is the result. This guy built a swag startup and turned it into like a multi-million-dollar business just using a Typeform, Zapier, and, you know, something else. And I'm asking him, did you get any traffic? Did you get any hits? You know, this is how I think,
sure.
right? This is my approach. And to me, when another story comes up, and I don't know if you're aware of Snopes. Snopes is the fact-checking website for the internet. So Facebook and Twitter go to Snopes when all this fake news is running around, right? But anyway, Michael, who's the founder of Swag Up, he's like, yeah, you know, I talked to this guy from Snopes, and he says, you know, he wants you guys to do a similar story like you did for me with, you know, and I was like, yeah, why not? They get 40 million visitors to their website every month. But anyway, you get the point. Like, I wouldn't have got that referral had I not taken care of Michael. You know what I mean? And this is what I want to do. I want to tell great stories.
That's another whole podcast episode about telling stories, but we'll save that for another time. Thank you so much for your time, Paul. It's been really cool. Where can people get in touch with you?
I'd say the best place is LinkedIn. Just don't send me a shitty, you know, hey man, I just want to connect, or hey, are you interested in my tool? Or, you know, the sneaky underhanded stuff. But LinkedIn's a cool place. I like interacting with people there. I generally don't mind, you know, having DMs with people there. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm not there as much. But yeah, I'm lurking on LinkedIn.
Lurking in the shadows. Thanks, Paul. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Todd, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the podcast, guys. If you want to get links to any of the resources we discussed in the interview, head over to upromedia.com/podcast. Until next time, take it easy.